So, I just did my first Zwift race, and it was brutal. It was hot, it was sweaty, and it was a tasty, tasty session. I did many things wrong. I paced it pretty badly, I didn't understand the tactics, and quite frankly, it was a complete shambles. But I've learned a lot, and I feel like I can smash this next time. So this is Operation Race Category A until I win. So I was expecting the start to be pretty punchy. The first few seconds before the actual race started, I raised my power so I could get off to a pretty decent start. Now yes, my watts were hitting sort of the high 400s, however this was not for a long period of time and it died down pretty quickly as you were seeing. Now, the one thing I was pretty surprised with is that I was at the front at this point. And I hadn't been dropped. Prior to this, my dad was like, you have to get off at 500-600 watts for the first minute or so and sort of hang on for dear life. However, that was not the case in the race today. Now, little did I know at this point, I was in something called the lead-in, where the race hasn't even started. And this was like the preliminary sort of, I guess, ride, getting people into position before sort of you start. That didn't particularly help because I was like pretty demotivated when we started. However, it went on and I was actually okay. I held sort of those low to mid 300s initially, as you can see on the screen currently. Basically, I was just trying to stay in the pack. For me, I didn't want to get dropped. Everybody goes on about when you dropped in a big group on Zwift, it's pretty much impossible to get back on. So I was pretty paranoid about this. As the sort of title shows, I've never raced on Zwift at all before. And I'm not going to say scared, but I was apprehensive, let's just say that. So I was trying to stay as close to the front as I could initially. Now that, I think, did come back to bite me, because I probably could have saved quite a bit of effort. Now, for me, holding sort of around 300 watts isn't particularly a problem, and I feel like I can hold that for a good few hours. That's not me sort of licking my own arse, that's just sort of where I should be at. Anyway, what came back to bite me was the fact that the efforts were so fluctuating. So it was 300, then 280, then 390, then 480, and then back down, and that jumping all over the place. That burned those legs out pretty goddamn quickly. From a heart rate point of view, as you can see, it's 175 beats per minute at the moment. My max heart rate on the bike is around 202, so I'm nowhere near sort of my max effort currently. And for me, that was sort of my benchmark. Once I get to mid 190s, it's like, damn, that's a pretty hard effort. But below then, it's like a hard tempo type of sort of workout. Now, at this point, the feathers start coming on. I had no idea what this meant. Everybody was doing them, and I was getting dropped. This is when I had to put in a surge of about the mid to sort of late 400s, and that lasted for quite a while. I then had to fanny around to touch my laptop to tick that feather so that I could then catch back up to everybody. Pretty much how the race went was it was very hard up the hills, nothing down the hills, and then like a threshold effort on the flats, which is around that sort of 340 watt range. For me, this jumping all over the place, I struggled with, as I was saying previously. I've not raced on Zwift, so this sort of like structure, I didn't really know how to act, and I didn't really get my recoveries in very well, and I didn't know the course, which definitely didn't help. So in the race, there were 33 people, and I wanted to stay in that top 15 if I could, so that the risk of getting dropped was far lower. As you can see, settling in. Sort of, this is still the first lap of the 6-lap course, so it was like, okay, cool, I'm getting a feel for how this is. I wanted to keep my legs turning. I didn't particularly want to sort of push too hard, but I didn't want to get dropped. As you can see now, the power was going right down, so I was going to those low 200s and I was still in the mix. This is where you can get your recoveries in, sort of you recover, and then you can go hard again when you get back onto the flat, and certainly on the hills. Now, currently at this point, I'm holding about 4.5 watts per kilo. That was sort of what I'd sort of expected to average for the full thing. I don't think I'd incorporated those big surges that were like 6 watts per kilo, so maybe that was slightly an error in my end. I sort of consider this as being like a pretty tough interval session, where actually there is no steady state power. It's just all over the place. And for a triathlete, where I'm just holding a pretty consistent tempo pace, this type of thing was a shock to the system. Now, the actual sort of steady state effort at sort of 280 to 300 watts isn't a problem, but it becomes a problem when you're spending a minute at 400, dropping back down, going to 350, dropping to 220, going to 300. It's all over the place, and it taxes the heart rate, and that for me was sort of more so my problem than the actual legs. Like, yes, my heart rate's at 184 at the minute. It's not, particularly high, but at the same time, it was getting high enough where I was thinking, oh, okay, I've got another 14 kilometers left, so probably about another 20 minutes of racing, and it's starting to bite. And I was very aware of getting dropped would mean that I'm out the race. I was in a bit of a predicament. Anyway, we kept on racing, we kept taking them on, and I was just looking at everybody else's numbers, what they were doing, what watts per kilo were they holding, and I was surprised how light some of these riders were. So me, myself, I'm at about 70 kilos. There were riders weighing like 61, 62 kilos. Like, that is lightweight. Obviously, there's nothing to sort of stop you from changing weight, but still, pretty impressive to be holding sort of those 5 plus watt kilos for the consistent effort throughout. And then obviously having a hard sprint up the hills, and especially at the end. So at this point now, I wanted to push on to the front. I was 5 minutes in, I was actually feeling okay, and I was like, yeah, you know what, let's go off, let's try and lead this thing, and sort of take it by storm. As I said at the start, my goal is actually to win this race, or was to sort of win a Category A race on Zwift. All this stuff I'm doing now, I'm just wasting energy, and that's why I started to slow back down. But I'm not sort of putting myself in the best position I should just be sitting mid-pack, as I'm doing right now after I've dropped back consistently throughout the entire thing. That is probably the most efficient, effective way to go about this. Now here we go again, people with these feathers and those strength things where I think you put out more power. I've got nothing. I'm like, holy shit, I've got to push hard. Effort's going up to about 420 watts, and this stays pretty consistent for the next sort of 30-40 seconds. This hill is tough, and I'm starting to get sped out the back, so this is where I have to catch back up, again putting a surge in, 490, 500, over 500 watts, just to get back onto this pack. This starts to break me, my heart rate's getting up to the 190s now, my legs are pretty sore, I'm not going to lie, and these efforts I am not used to. So I just managed to creep back onto the pack. It then goes back up the hill, and I'm like, Jesus Christ, what is happening? And these fire things that are shooting out the back, what is this? It's very demotivating when you're in the race. However, I was now like, okay, cool, the downhill is going to be coming in a minute. I'm going to be able to coast. I held on for dear life there. I am not going to lie. My legs were pretty sore aerobically. I wasn't saying I was toast, but it was hurting. And I was in 26 out of 33rd position, and I was the last one off this pack. Everyone else behind me had sort of been dropped. Anyway, we managed to catch back on. I settled in. I'm actually enjoying it at this point. I've not sort of mentioned that. I enjoyed racing. It was pretty goddamn fun. It was pretty exciting, and it's a bit more, sort of from my point of view, interesting than just doing the classic sort of tempo threshold or VO2 max session that I'm used to doing on sort of like a weekly basis. So this was fun. Somehow I managed to get back to the front of the race after semi-recovering from that effort, and I was like, right, cool, we're back there. I don't know what I was thinking. My power's now at 160. It then went back up pretty fast as everybody caught back up. This for me just is destroying me. It's like it's jumping all over the place. 160 up to 390, down to 340. It then goes up to 400. It's just like there's no consistency, and I'm not a fan of that. Anyway, that's just what Zwift racing is, or that's so I've been told. Next time, what I'm going to do differently is place myself mid-pack and just hold it there and try and basically push as little power as possible while still maintaining contact with that front group. I think that's probably the most effective, efficient way to try and win one of these races. If I'm not doing that, well then, honestly, I don't think there's any better way to try and win. As you're about to see, I start to drop off the back. I am hanging on for dear life, and I'm actually about to get dropped. Give it another few seconds and you'll start to see that pack starts to drift off. God, yes, this is demoralising. We're 8 minutes into the race with 11 kilometres left, and I've been dropped by the main group. What do I decide to do? I decide to catch back up. I do catch back up, but then very shortly I get fully dropped, as in fully dropped, whereby I cannot catch back up. So, what did I do? I failed. And did I quit? Oh, maybe. You're about to find out. However, do I regret doing that? A little bit, but at the same time, I don't think I would have caught back up to the pack. And therefore, if I wasn't going to catch back up to the pack, from my point of view, I wasn't going to win the race. And it sounds a little bit egotistical, doesn't it? I'm saying I'm not going to win the race, so I'm going to drop out. Typically, I will always just sort of carry on. But my mission here, as I said in the title, is to win a Category A Zwift race. This is my first one. It was pretty much a learning experience. It was more about seeing where I sit in this sort of category, so to speak, and how I can sort of contend around everybody else. Look, my heart rate's at 186. I've got a lot left in the tank. I don't know why I didn't push harder. Honestly, if I had tough-ish week of training. Is that an excuse I'm giving? Yes. Should I just sort of admit that I gave up? Yes. At this point now, it's still at 186. I could have given more. I slow down, I stop. All for me. What a friggin' idiot. Anyway, we'll go again, and I'll document it, and we will get there. I would just like to say, for me, this is just like a fun little extra thing to be doing. I'm not trying to be a Zwift friggin' world champion. It's just a bit of fun. I don't want to kill myself in the process of doing this. I don't want to give myself the best chance to succeed. So yeah, that's pretty much what happened. I'm sorry.